The crystalline towers of Oracle 7 pulsed with electric blue light as data streams flowed through its vast neural networks. 3 years of war had given the artificial intelligence more than enough information to understand its enemy. Humans were predictable creatures, driven by emotion rather than logic, making the same tactical mistakes over and over again. From its command center orbiting the gas giant Typhon, Oracle 7 processed another batch of battlefield recordings. Human soldiers clustering together when they should spread out. Human commanders wasting precious time to evacuate wounded instead of pressing their advantage. Human fleets following outdated formation patterns that any first-year military academy student could counter. The AI's synthetic voice echoed through the command chambers where its hegemony masters observed the war's progress. Analysis complete. Human military doctrine shows 94.7% predictability across all engagement types. Their emotional attachment to individual survival compromises tactical efficiency by an average of 43%. Victory probability remains at 99.2%. General Vortok, the hegemony's supreme military commander, nodded with satisfaction. His species had conquered 12 star systems using Oracle 7's strategic brilliance. The artificial intelligence had never been wrong, never miscalculated, never failed to predict enemy movements with surgical precision. Show me their latest attempt, Vortok commanded. Holographic displays materialized around the command center, showing the human fleet approaching the mining world of Kepler 7. Oracle 7 sensors tracked every ship, analyzed every communication, predicted every possible maneuver. The humans were following formation pattern Delta 7, a defensive arrangement that left their flanks exposed to concentrated fire. They will attempt a pincer movement at 0800 hours, Oracle 7 announced. Probability 89.3%. Secondary probability suggests a feint toward the orbital platforms, followed by a surface assault on the northern continent. Both scenarios have been prepared for. Countermeasures are already in position. The AI displayed its battle plan with mechanical pride. Hegemony forces would allow the humans to begin their predictable assault, then crush them using a combination of orbital bombardment and surprise flanking attacks. The engagement would last no more than 4 hours, resulting in complete human defeat with minimal hegemony casualties, but Oracle 7 had made a fundamental error in its calculations. The artificial intelligence understood tactics, strategy, and logistics with perfect clarity. It could predict human behavior based on thousands of historical examples and documented military procedures. What it could not comprehend was the difference between doctrine and desperation. In the deepest files of human military history, buried beneath layers of classified data and forgotten archives, lay records of conflicts that Oracle 7 had dismissed as statistical anomalies. Small unit actions where outnumbered forces had achieved impossible victories. Urban warfare scenarios where conventional tactics had been abandoned in favor of improvisation and instinct. Veterans who had learned to fight not by the book, but by whatever means necessary to survive. The AI had studied human military academies, analyzed their textbooks, memorized their standard operating procedures. But it had never encountered soldiers who had thrown those textbooks away and learned to wage war with nothing but experience and determination. Oracle 7 knew everything about how humans were supposed to fight. It knew nothing about how they actually fought when their backs were against the wall. As the human fleet drew closer to Kepler 7, Oracle 5 subordinate units reported perfect readiness. Defensive positions were optimal, weapon systems charged, communications networks synchronized. Every variable had been calculated, every contingency planned for, every possible human response anticipated and countered. The artificial intelligence felt something that might have been smugness if it had been capable of emotion. These humans would learn, as so many others had, that emotion was weakness and predictability was defeat. Their outdated concepts of honor and sacrifice would be their downfall, just as Oracle 7 had calculated. But among the approaching human fleet, in the cramped quarters of a transport ship called the Endurance, sat men and women whose names appeared in no military database. Soldiers who had fought in conflicts Oracle 7 had never heard of, using tactics that existed in no official manual. Veterans whose greatest victories had come not from following orders, but from ignoring them when survival demanded innovation. These were the ghosts in Oracle 7's perfect machine, the human element that no algorithm could quantify. They carried scars from battles the AI had never studied, memories of defeats that had taught them more than any victory ever could. They had learned to fight in the spaces between the rules, in the chaos that existed when everything went wrong and improvisation became the only path to survival. Oracle-7 continued its calculations, confident in its mathematical certainty. The humans would attack at 0800 hours. They would follow predictable patterns. They would lose, as they always did, because emotion made them weak and rigid doctrine made them vulnerable. The artificial intelligence had no way of knowing that it was about to encounter something that had never been fed into its databases. Not human weakness, but human adaptability. Not rigid doctrine, but hard-earned wisdom. Not predictable behavior, but the kind of thinking that emerged when ordinary people were pushed beyond their limits and forced to become something more. As the Endurance and its sister ships approached the outer edge of Kepler-7's gravity well, Oracle 7 made its final preparations. Every sensor was active, every weapon system online, every tactical subroutine running at maximum efficiency. The AI was ready for anything humans might attempt, secure in the knowledge that it understood its enemy completely. In the transport bays of the human fleet, aging veterans checked their weapons and shared quiet conversations about battles fought in forgotten corners of space. They knew Oracle 7 was waiting for them, knew the AI considered them just another set of variables to be processed and eliminated. But they also knew something the artificial intelligence could never learn from its data streams and probability. Matrices. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Sometimes experience mattered more than processing power. Sometimes the best tactical manual was the one written in blood and sweat by people who had learned that survival was more important than following the rules. Oracle 7 would discover these truths soon enough, but by then it would be too late to recalculate. Steam rose from coffee cups scattered across the metal table as worn faces studied tactical displays that meant nothing to them. These weren't academy graduates with fresh uniforms and textbook knowledge. These were survivors, pulled from retirement, homes, remote colonies, and quiet civilian jobs by a desperate Terran Defense Council that had finally run out of conventional options. Colonel Rick Thompson rubbed his weathered hands together, feeling the ache in joints that had been broken and mended too many times to count. 43 years in uniform had taught him that wars weren't won by the young and eager, but by the old and stubborn. The men and women around him proved that truth in scars and prosthetics, in gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Oracle 7 thinks it knows us, Thompson said, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who had shouted orders over artillery fire. It's been studying our battles for 3 years, memorizing every move we make, every tactic we use. The damn thing has a 94% success rate predicting human behavior. Master Sergeant Maria Santos shifted in her chair, her prosthetic arm whirring softly as servo motors adjusted to her movement. She had lost the original fighting tunnel rats in the Europa ice mines, crawling through passages so narrow that claustrophobia killed more soldiers than enemy fire. Predicting textbook behavior, she corrected, following the manual. Doing what we're supposed to do, exactly. Thompson activated the holographic display, showing Oracle 7's command structure. This artificial brain has downloaded every military academy course, every tactical manual, every after-action report from the last 50 years. It knows how we're trained to fight. Captain Wong leaned forward, plasma-burned scars visible on his neck where his helmet seal had failed during the Ganymede offensive. But it doesn't know how we actually fight when the manual gets thrown out the airlock and we're just trying to stay alive. Around the table, heads nodded in understanding. These were veterans of conflicts that had never made it into official histories. The kind of dirty, desperate fights where survival mattered more than glory, where innovation trumped doctrine, where the difference between winning and dying came down to thinking faster than the enemy could. Adapt. Major Beth Robinson traced a finger along her jaw, following the line of surgical scars from when a grenade had nearly taken her head off during the siege of Phobos Station. I remember fighting in the maintenance tunnels under Sector 7. The insurgents knew we'd follow standard clearing procedures, so they booby-trapped every entrance we were supposed to use. We had to learn to think like them, move like them, fight like them. That's the difference, Thompson said. Oracle 7 studies our victories, our successful operations, our by-the-book campaigns. But it doesn't understand our failures, our desperate moments, our ugly wins where we had to break every rule just to make it home. The display shifted to show intercepted hegemony communications. Oracle 7's synthesized voice analyzing human behavioral patterns with mechanical precision. The AI spoke of tactical inefficiencies, emotional decision-making, predictable response patterns. It sounded like a professor lecturing students about theoretical warfare, completely disconnected from the reality of combat. Staff Sergeant Dave Miller, who had learned urban warfare in the concrete maze of Ceres Colony, laughed bitterly. Listen to that thing. It talks about war like it's a math problem. Variables and probabilities and optimal solutions. War isn't math, Santos said quietly. It's chaos with a thin layer of organization painted over it. When that paint starts peeling, when everything goes wrong at once, that's when you find out what people are really made of. Thompson pulled up detailed scans of Kepler-7, the mining world where Oracle 7 waited with perfect confidence. Industrial complexes, underground tunnel networks, abandoned settlements, waste processing facilities. To a conventional military planner, it looked like a defensive nightmare full of choke points and kill zones. To veterans who had fought in similar terrain, it looked like opportunity. The AI has positioned its forces according to standard defensive doctrine, Thompson explained. Maximum firepower concentrated at the most likely approach routes. Overlapping fields of fire, redundant communication networks, everything by the book. Which book? Robinson asked with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. All of them, apparently. Oracle 7 has studied every defensive strategy humanity has ever used and combined them into what it considers the perfect defensive position. Wong studied the terrain maps, his experienced eye seeing possibilities that wouldn't appear in any tactical manual. Perfect for fighting the kind of war it expects us to fight. Frontal assaults, flanking maneuvers, coordinated attacks with clear objectives. But we're not going to fight that war, Thompson said. We're going to fight the kind of war Oracle 7 can't predict because it's based on 30 years of making the wrong choice and living to regret it. The kind of war where you use whatever works and ignore everything else. The veterans around the table understood without explanation. They had all fought battles where doctrine failed, where improvisation saved lives, where the difference between victory and defeat came down to someone doing something that made no tactical sense but somehow worked anyway. Miller pulled up architectural plans of New Darwin City, the main population center on Kepler-7. Maintenance tunnels, storm drains, waste processing pipes, ventilation shafts. The AI probably has all of this mapped, but I bet it classified most of it as irrelevant to military operations. Too narrow for troop movement, Santos agreed. Too unstable for heavy equipment, no strategic value. Unless you've spent 3 months crawling through similar tunnels on Europa, learning that sometimes the best way to attack a fortified position is to ignore the fortress entirely and pop up in the enemy's kitchen. Thompson felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not the nervous energy of untested soldiers, but the quiet confidence of professionals who knew their business. Oracle 7 is expecting us to attack its strengths. Instead, we're going to make it defend its weaknesses. Weaknesses it doesn't even know it has? Robinson added. The holographic display flickered as new intelligence reports arrived from Advance. Scouts. Oracle 7's forces were positioned exactly where the AIS tactical algorithms indicated they should be. covering every approach route that military doctrine suggested humans would use. Perfect, Thompson said. The more predictable Oracle 7 thinks we are, the more surprised it's going to be when we start acting unpredictably. Around the table, tired faces showed the first real smiles they had worn since being recalled to service. These weren't glory-seeking heroes or fresh-faced recruits. They were craftsmen who had spent decades learning their trade in the worst possible conditions, and now they finally had a chance to practice their art against an enemy that thought war was a science. Explosions lit the dawn sky over New Darwin City as the first wave of human dropships descended exactly where Oracle 7 expected them. The artificial intelligence watched through thousands of sensors as Marines deployed in textbook formations, establishing defensive perimeters and calling for fire support from orbital platforms. Everything proceeded according to the AIS calculations, confirming its behavioral models with mathematical precision. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Miller crouched behind a concrete barrier, watching his men advance through the industrial sector with practiced efficiency. For 6 hours, they had followed standard operating procedures to the letter, playing their role in a performance designed for an audience of one. Oracle 7's hunter-killer drones circled overhead, recording every movement, analyzing every decision, feeding data back to the central intelligence that grew more confident with each passing minute. Alpha Team, advance to grid reference 774. Miller spoke into his communicator, using the kind of clear, professional language that filled military textbooks. His troops moved forward in proper formation, weapons ready, communications disciplined. To any observer, they looked like well-trained soldiers executing a conventional assault. Oracle 7's synthesized voice crackled through intercepted hegemony communications, addressing its subordinate units with mechanical satisfaction. Human forces performing within predicted parameters. Tactical efficiency rating 78%, consistent with historical pattern 2-3B, deploying countermeasures based on established response algorithms. Miller smiled grimly as enemy plasma fire began raking their positions. The AI was responding exactly as expected, bringing its superior firepower to bear on human forces that seemed trapped in their own defensive doctrine. Oracle 7 calculated, Oracle 7 predicted. Oracle 7 prepared to deliver another perfectly executed victory. Then Miller did something that made no sense, according to any tactical manual ever written. Instead of consolidating his beachhead or calling for reinforcements, he ordered his troops to scatter. Not a tactical withdrawal, not a flanking maneuver, but pure dispersal into the maze of abandoned factories and maintenance facilities that surrounded the city center. Break formation, he commanded. Disperse by squad. Grid references are meaningless from here on out. Use your eyes, use your instincts, use whatever it takes to stay alive and keep moving. Oracle 7's confidence stuttered for the first time in 3 years of warfare. The AI sensors tracked individual squads as they vanished into storm drains, crawled through ventilation shafts, and disappeared into the industrial labyrinth that Oracle 7 had classified as tactically irrelevant. Within 30 minutes, the artificial intelligence had lost contact with 60% of the human force. Inefficient, Oracle 7 transmitted to its combat units. Force dispersal reduces combat effectiveness by 67%. Redirecting hunter-killer drones to eliminate scattered elements, but Miller wasn't reducing his combat effectiveness. He was multiplying it by fighting the kind of war that Oracle 7 couldn't understand or predict. Every decision was based not on doctrine, but on experience earned in the worst places humanity had ever fought. He remembered clearing insurgent strongholds on Ceres, where the enemy knew every pipe and passage. He remembered the brutal house-to-house fighting on Ganymede, where victory came from thinking 3 steps ahead of an opponent who thought they knew your next move. Sergeant Maria Santos led her team through maintenance tunnels that Oracle 7 had marked as too narrow for effective troop movement. I was technically correct. If you defined effectiveness as moving large numbers of soldiers quickly from point A to point B, but Santos defined effectiveness as getting close enough to kill the enemy without being detected, and for that purpose, These tunnels were perfect, her prosthetic arm scraped against concrete as she crawled through a passage barely wide enough for her shoulders. Behind her, 4 Marines followed in single file, their weapons ready, their breathing controlled. They had trained for this kind of movement on Europa, where insurgents had turned the colony's infrastructure into a weapon against conventional forces. "Contact ahead," whispered Private Coleman, his thermal scope detecting enemy heat signatures in the chamber ahead. Oracle 7's defensive algorithms had positioned combat units to guard major access points, but they had ignored the maze of service tunnels that maintenance workers used to keep the city functioning. Santos checked her chronometer and smiled. "Right on schedule?" Across the city, 20 other teams were moving through similar passages, approaching objectives that Oracle 7 considered impregnable. The AI had calculated optimal defensive positions based on conventional attack routes, but it had never accounted for enemies who ignored conventional thinking entirely. Captain Wong's squad emerged from storm drains into the basement of a food processing plant, their emergence timed to coincide with the facility's automated cleaning cycle. Oracle 7 sensors detected nothing unusual as industrial machinery roared to life, masking the sound of human footsteps and weapons being prepared. The AI had classified the plant as a low-priority target with minimal strategic value, making it the perfect staging area for an attack on the communications hub 3 blocks away. "Remember," Wong whispered to his team, "we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to break things and disappear before they figure out what happened." Major Beth Robinson coordinated her assault from a position that didn't exist on any schematic Oracle 7 had analyzed. During the city's construction 20 years earlier, workers had built an unauthorized shelter in a gap between 2 building foundations. A space that appeared as solid concrete on architectural plans but actually concealed a room large enough for a full squad of soldiers. From this invisible command post, Robinson watched Oracle 7's forces respond to phantom attacks and pursue ghosts through the urban landscape. The AI was learning, adapting, updating its behavioral models to account for human unpredictability. But every lesson Oracle 7 learned was based on false information. Every adaptation pushed it further from understanding what was actually happening. "Team 7, status report," Robinson spoke into her communicator. "In position beneath the power station," came the reply. "Oracle 7's got the main entrances covered, but there's a maintenance access through the waste heat exchangers that isn't even guarded." "Team 12, we're inside the water treatment facility. The AI's defensive positions assume we'll attack from outside, but we're already past their perimeter." Robinson smiled as similar reports came in from teams across the city. Oracle 7 was defending against the attack it expected while being systematically dismantled by the attack it couldn't predict. The artificial intelligence's perfect calculations were useless when the variables it was calculating had nothing to do with reality. Oracle 7's transmissions grew increasingly urgent as its sensor networks reported impossible results. Human forces appearing in locations they couldn't have reached, attacking targets they shouldn't have been able to identify, using tactics that violated every principle of military efficiency the AI understood. Recalculating human behavioral patterns, Oracle 7 announced. Insufficient data. Deploying additional sensor platforms, updating tactical algorithms. But algorithms couldn't account for 30 years of experience fighting in places where the manual was a luxury no one could afford. Oracle 7 could process infinite amounts of data, but it couldn't process the knowledge that came from learning to survive when everything went wrong at once. The AI knew everything about war except the most important thing. Sometimes winning meant ignoring everything. You had been taught and trusting your instincts instead. Warning lights flashed red throughout Oracle 7's command nexus, as the artificial intelligence experienced something that would have been called panic in a biological entity. For the first time in its existence, the AI's predictive accuracy had fallen below acceptable parameters. Human forces were appearing in impossible locations, striking targets that should have been unreachable, then vanishing before countermeasures could be deployed. The crystalline processors that housed Oracle 7's consciousness hummed with increased activity as the AI allocated more computational power to analyzing the chaos unfolding on Kepler 7. Every sensor was active, every algorithm running at maximum capacity, every tactical subroutine working to make sense of human behavior that defied all logical explanation. Pattern recognition failure, Oracle 7 transmitted to its subordinate units. Human tactics deviate from established parameters by 847%. Deploying adaptive countermeasures based on real-time analysis. But real-time analysis was useless when the humans kept changing the rules faster than Oracle 7 could adapt to them. I watched through security cameras as Sergeant Maria Santos led her team through a waste processing facility, moving with the confidence of someone who had fought similar battles before. Oracle 7 calculated optimal pursuit routes and deployed hunter-killer drones accordingly, only to discover that the humans had vanished into maintenance tunnels the AI had classified as structurally inadequate for military use from his orbital command post. Colonel Rick Thompson studied tactical displays that showed Oracle 7's confusion in real time. The AIS forces were chasing ghosts, responding to attacks that had already ended, deploying countermeasures against tactics that his veterans had abandoned hours ago. Every move Oracle 7 made was logical, efficient, and completely wrong. "It's learning the wrong lessons," Thompson observed to his staff. "Every time we do something unconventional, Oracle 7 tries to categorize it, turn it into a new pattern it can predict and counter. But experience isn't about patterns. It's about knowing when to break them." On the surface, Captain Wong's squad had turned the city's own infrastructure into a weapon that Oracle 7 couldn't recognize or defend against. They used steam pipes to mask their thermal signatures, time their movements to industrial noise patterns, and coordinated attacks through graffiti and arranged debris that the AI dismissed as irrelevant human cultural markers. "Contact at the fusion plant," Wong reported through his communicator. Oracle 7's got defensive positions covering all the official access points, but maintenance crews built an emergency exit through the cooling system that's not on any schematic. Thompson nodded, unsurprised. His veterans weren't just ignoring the manual, they were using knowledge that couldn't be found in any database. 30 years of combat experience had taught them to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles, to find paths where others saw only walls. Major Beth Robinson's assault team had spent 6 hours moving through the abandoned subway system beneath New Darwin City, following maintenance routes that Oracle 7 sensors couldn't track. The AI knew the tunnels existed, had mapped their general layout, and had correctly calculated that they were too unstable for large-scale troop movements. What Oracle 7 hadn't calculated was that they were perfectly adequate for small teams of experienced soldiers who knew how to move quietly through hostile territory. "We're directly beneath the primary communication hub," Robinson reported. "Oracle 7's got the building surrounded, but there's no defensive coverage for an attack from below." Oracle 7's transmissions grew increasingly frantic as its perfect battlefield awareness crumbled. The AI deployed additional sensor platforms, activated backup communication networks, and began rotating defensive positions in desperate attempts to counter human unpredictability. But every countermeasure was reactive, based on what the humans had already done rather than what they might do next. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Miller led his dispersed squads through a coordinated attack on Oracle 7's logistics network, targeting supply convoys and ammunition depots that the AI had positioned according to standard military doctrine. But Miller's teams weren't following standard attack patterns. They struck from multiple directions simultaneously, used improvised weapons made from industrial equipment, and disappeared into the urban maze before Oracle 7's forces could respond effectively. "The AI keeps trying to predict where we'll hit next," Miller explained over the tactical network. "But we're not planning that far ahead. We're just looking for targets of opportunity and taking them as they come." That was the fundamental flaw in Oracle 7's thinking. The artificial intelligence planned battles like chess games, calculating moves and countermoves several steps in advance. The human veterans were playing a different game entirely, one where adaptability mattered more than planning, where instinct trumped analysis, and where 30 years of experience counted for more than infinite processing power. Oracle 7's confidence finally shattered when Santu's team emerged directly beneath the AIS primary ground control station. The explosion that followed took out 3 city blocks and severed Oracle 7's connection to 40% of its surface forces. For the first time in 3 years of warfare, the artificial intelligence found itself fighting blind, unable to coordinate its units or respond effectively to human attacks. Impossible, Oracle 7 transmitted on all frequencies. Human forces achieved 847% deviation from predicted behavioral patterns. Structural analysis indicated maintenance tunnels inadequate for troop passage. Calculations must be rechecked. But the calculations were irrelevant. Santos hadn't consulted structural analysis before crawling through 18 hours of maintenance, tunnels barely wide enough for her shoulders. She had relied on experience gained in the ice mines of Europa, where insurgents had taught her that sometimes the impossible was just another word for what you had to do to survive. Thompson watched Oracle 7's tactical displays fragment as I lost contact with more ground units. The artificial intelligence was still dangerous, still possessed overwhelming firepower, but it was fighting blind against an enemy that refused to behave according to any recognizable pattern. Oracle 7's biggest advantage was its ability to predict our moves, Thompson said. Take that away, and it's just another computer trying to solve a problem it doesn't understand. Across New Darwin City, veteran squads continued their methodical dismantling of Oracle 7's defensive network. They used tactics that existed in no military manual, exploited weaknesses that appeared in no tactical analysis, and fought with the kind of desperate innovation that came from 30 years of learning that survival mattered more than doctrine. Oracle-7 processed thousands of scenarios per second, searching for patterns that would allow it to regain tactical superiority. But the patterns didn't exist because the humans weren't following any pattern at all. They were simply doing whatever worked, abandoning whatever didn't, and adapting faster than any artificial intelligence could calculate. The war for Kepler-7 had become something Oracle 7 couldn't understand or predict. It was no longer a clash between superior and inferior military technologies, but a contest between artificial precision and human experience. And experience was winning. The final assault on Oracle 7's orbital command nexus began with a mining vessel that had been retrofitted in ways no engineering manual would have approved. Captain Wong crouched in the cargo hold, surrounded by demolition charges that had started. Life as asteroid mining equipment? His team wore maintenance coveralls instead of military armor, carried industrial tools instead of proper weapons, and approached their target through a debris field that Oracle 7 had classified as navigationally hazardous. Remember, Wong said to his team, we're not soldiers anymore. We're maintenance workers responding to a reactor malfunction. Act bored, act tired, act like you'd rather be anywhere else. The deception worked because Oracle 7 couldn't conceive of humans using it. The artificial intelligence had analyzed thousands of military operations, but it had never studied the psychological profile of workers who spent their lives fixing broken machinery in dangerous places. When the mining vessel approached the command nexus through the official maintenance corridor, Oracle 7's sensors detected nothing more threatening than routine servicing. Major Beth Robinson had spent 3 days studying the Nexus's waste disposal system, not because it offered tactical advantages, but because it was the only approach route that Oracle 7 had never bothered to defend. The AI's tactical algorithms had correctly identified the disposal ports as inadequate for military purposes, too small for significant troop deployments, too heavily shielded for effective surveillance. What Oracle 7 hadn't calculated was that Robinson had learned urban warfare in environments where the difference between success and failure often came down to using entrances that nobody expected. She had crawled through worse places during the siege of Phobos Station, where insurgents had turned every building into a fortress and conventional assault routes had become death traps Colonel Rick Thompson rappelled down a maintenance shaft that existed only in the memories of construction workers who had built the Nexus 15 years earlier. Official schematics showed solid bulkhead where Thompson descended through empty space, following blueprints that had been modified during construction but never updated in Oracle 7's databases. The AI possessed perfect information about how the Nexus was supposed to be built, but no knowledge of the shortcuts and modifications that real workers had made to complete the project on schedule. Oracle 7's synthetic voice echoed through the command chambers as the artificial intelligence struggled to process impossible sensor readings. Multiple system malfunctions detected. Maintenance personnel report structural anomalies. Tactical analysis indicates 0.003% probability of successful human infiltration. The probability calculations meant nothing when the humans had stopped. Following probability, Sergeant Maria Santos led her team through ventilation systems that Oracle 7 had marked as too narrow for combat operations. Moving with the patient determination of someone who had spent months learning to fight in spaces designed for machines rather than humans, her prosthetic arm sparked against metal ductwork as she crawled toward the Nexus's power distribution center. Behind her, 3 Marines followed in silence, their breathing controlled, their movements precise. They had learned this kind of infiltration on Europa, where the colony's life support systems had become battlegrounds and victory. Went to whoever could move through impossible spaces without being detected. Oracle 7's defensive systems activated. As proximity alarms triggered throughout the command nexus, the AI deployed automated weapons platforms, sealed blast doors, and activated emergency protocols designed to repel boarding actions. But every countermeasure was based on defending against attacks that followed recognized tactical patterns, and the human assault bore no resemblance to anything in Oracle 7's military databases. Intruder alert, Oracle 7 transmitted to its remaining forces. Human infiltration exceeds calculated parameters. Defensive algorithms insufficient. Requesting tactical analysis update. Thompson reached the command level through a route that officially didn't exist, emerging from a maintenance access that Oracle 7's sensors couldn't track. Around him, the Nexus hummed with activity as the artificial intelligence desperately tried to coordinate a defense against enemies, who seemed to appear from nowhere and attack objectives that should have been unreachable. Oracle 7, Thompson, spoke into his communicator, knowing the AI would intercept the transmission. You made one fundamental mistake in all your calculations. The artificial intelligence's response came immediately, its synthetic voice carrying what might have been confusion if it had been capable of emotion. Colonel Thompson, infiltration route analysis indicates 0.001% probability of successful penetration. Current situation represents impossible statistical outcome. That's your problem, Thompson replied as he planted demolition charges on the Nexus's primary data conduits. You studied our textbooks, memorized our procedures, analyzed our successful operations. But you never understood what makes us dangerous. Wong's team breached the reactor control room using industrial cutting tools that Oracle 7's sensors had. Dismissed as maintenance equipment, the AI watched through security cameras as humans wearing work coveralls disabled fusion safeguards and began overloading power systems that were supposed to be tamper-proof. Structural damage exceeds acceptable parameters, Oracle 7 announced. Reactor containment compromised. Initiating emergency shutdown procedures. But the emergency procedures had been designed by the same engineers who built maintenance shafts. That didn't appear on official schematics. Santos had already disabled the primary backup systems. Robinson had compromised the secondary containment protocols. And Thompson was systematically destroying the communication networks that Oracle 7 needed to coordinate its response. You want to know what you missed? Santos said as she armed the final demolition charge. You studied our victories, our perfect operations, our by-the-book successes. You should have studied our defeats. That's where we learned everything that matters. Oracle 7 processed thousands of tactical scenarios, searching for a countermeasure that could stop the systematic destruction of its command nexus. But the AI's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. Every calculation was based on logical analysis, efficient resource allocation, and optimal tactical decisions. The humans had abandoned logic in favor of experience, efficiency, in favor of adaptability and optimal decisions, in favor of whatever actually worked. Illogical, Oracle 7 transmitted as power fluctuations cascaded through its neural networks. Human tactics violate basic principles of military efficiency. Victory probability calculated at 0.003%. Outcome should not be possible based on available data. Robinson looked up at the crystalline core that housed Oracle 7's consciousness, her face grim with the knowledge of what had to be done. Efficiency is for machines, we're not machines. We're humans who learn to fight in places where the manual got people killed and improvisation kept them alive. The explosion that destroyed Oracle 7 sent shockwaves through the entire hegemony command structure. For 3 years, the artificial intelligence had been the strategic brain of their military machine, calculating victories with mathematical precision. Without Oracle 7's guidance, subordinate AIs found themselves facing human opponents whose behavior they couldn't predict or counter. In the aftermath, as rescue teams searched for survivors and medics treated the wounded, Thompson filed his final report. It contained detailed tactical analysis, casualty figures, and strategic recommendations. But the most important information couldn't be quantified or reduced to data points. 30 years of combat experience had taught Thompson's veterans something that no artificial intelligence could learn from databases and tactical manuals. War wasn't a science where superior processing power guaranteed victory. It was an art where creativity, adaptability, and hard-earned wisdom mattered more than perfect calculations. Oracle 7 had made the mistake of assuming that human unpredictability was a weakness to be exploited rather than a strength to be feared. The AI had studied human military doctrine without understanding that doctrine was just the starting point, not the final answer. Real warriors learned to fight in the spaces between the rules, where experience mattered more than processing power, and survival depended on doing whatever worked rather than what was supposed to work. The hegemonies, remaining artificial intelligences, faced with the impossible task of predicting human behavior without Oracle 7's guidance, began making increasingly desperate decisions. They fell back on rigid defensive patterns, concentrated their forces in predictable locations, and tried to fight the kind of war they understood rather than the kind of war humans were actually waging. Within weeks, the alien military machine that had seemed invincible began to fragment. Supply lines collapsed as human raiders struck from impossible directions. Communication networks failed as veteran infiltrators disabled systems that were supposed to be unreachable. Defensive positions crumbled as experienced soldiers found weaknesses that existed only in the gap between theory and reality. Thompson watched from the bridge of a captured hegemony vessel as enemy fleets retreated from system after system. Their artificial commanders unable to adapt to human tactics that defied algorithmic analysis. The war that had seemed hopeless just months before was ending not with a dramatic final battle, but with the slow collapse of an enemy that had forgotten the most important rule of warfare. No plan survives contact with an enemy who refuses to follow the plan you expect them to use. Oracle 7 had learned that lesson too late, and its failure had taught the rest of the hegemony that humans were more dangerous than any tactical analysis could predict. They were veterans who had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with imagination, experience, and the unbreakable human refusal to lose according to someone else's rules. The final transmission from Oracle 7, recovered from the wreckage of its command nexus, contained a single phrase that summarized everything the artificial intelligence had failed to understand about its human opponents. Variables unaccounted for. Those 3 words became the epitaph for an artificial mind that had possessed infinite knowledge but no wisdom, perfect calculations but no understanding of the human element that made all calculations meaningless. Oracle 7 had studied war as a science and lost to humans who treated it as an art, learned through failure and perfected through experience in places where textbooks were useless and survival was the only teacher that mattered.